Hello and welcome to this video. My name is Barry Beckham. Under the heading of layers, in this video we're going to take a look at copy and paste, something we're going to need quite a bit, and we're also going to take a look at layer masks, another important part of the layers system. In this project I'm going to duplicate the pelican you can see on screen, flip it over so we've got two and we can have one facing the other. It's basically copy and paste, a technique we're going to feature quite a bit through these videos, so we need to see how that works. In addition, we're also going to take a little bit more of a detailed look at how layer masks work too. Now, before you Camera Club natural history buffs start having a seizure about me manipulating images of animals, I would say this. Firstly, this is an exercise to demonstrate layers and layer mask techniques in general, so bear with me on that score. 2. Since when has a common bird like a pelican in Australia or a swan in the UK ever been a serious contender in a natural history competition? And thirdly, and more importantly, photography and Photoshop is an art. Now, for this exercise I don't think we're going to need a selection at all. What we're going to do first of all is to separate the image from its canvas. In other words, we're going to unlock our background layer by clicking the layer lock. Now, if it's my intention to copy this pelican, flip it over onto the right hand side, I'm going to need some extra canvas to do that. Now, because I've already separated my canvas from my image by removing the background lock, I can just increase my canvas size. Now, we can do that by going up to the extreme top left, going to our image menu and canvas size. Now, we have two ways to view the operation of the canvas size window. One of those is with this box ticked, and you can see it's called relative. With this option, all we need to do is to put a measurement in the width. For example, if I were to add 10 inches to the width, then Photoshop would create my canvas 5 inches on the left and 5 inches on the right. If I use the anchor point to anchor my picture to the extreme left by just clicking that little icon, then it would apply all 10 inches of the width to the right hand side. The other way we can look at this window is by unticking the relative box, and then we get to see the actual size of the image. So if my image width is 20, what I could do, I suppose, is just double that up to 40. We're not going to need all of that, but best to create it, and we can always remove what we don't want later. So let me double that to 40. But in fact I do want all of that size put on the right hand side, so the anchor I'm going to keep on the left. When I click OK, you'll see the new blank canvas is applied, and if I hit Ctrl 0, you'll see it in total. The next stage is to copy my pelican. Now, I can do that with Ctrl C and Ctrl V, as you can see, or I could hit Ctrl J. Either one will do the job we want. But if I take this one away for a moment, and I now do the same thing with Ctrl J, you can see it's put the image directly over the top of the other one. So slightly different, but nothing really to worry about. What I need to do next then is to flip that layer naught copy over the other way. We can do that by going up to the left hand side of the screen, to the edit menu, to our transform, and to flip horizontal. Now I can just use the move tool, which I've got from the top of the toolbox, to move the image into place. But of course we don't want our pelicans quite that far apart. Now, if I think about how close I want the pelicans to be, if I click and drag this one back, of course, I start to lose the one that's sitting underneath on the layered stack. Now we could rename these if we wanted to. I'll just call this one left and the other one right. It's not essential to rename layers, but sometimes it helps. So what we may want to do here is just temporarily take a bit of the opacity off of the right layer. If I take a little bit off, then as I drag it this way, at least I can see where the bird's going to be. So if I wanted it to be somewhere like that, I think that's going to do pretty well. Now what I may as well do before we go too much further is to crop away all of that canvas, which I now don't need. But before I do that even, let's put this layer right back up to 100%. I'll pick up my crop. I've got some values in there from a previous piece of work, so I need to make sure I clear those, because I want that and I want this to be there. I'll commit the crop, hit Control 0, because we need to look at layer masks. So I need to have the layer that's sitting on top selected, and I can go down to the bottom of the layers and create the mask. Now the mask appears on the right hand side of our thumbnail. You'll also notice that we've got a little frame around it, so it's telling us at the moment if we did any editing on the picture, we're going to be working on the mask as opposed to the image, which I would need to select. See the little frame appear around the outer edge? If I wanted to change the color of this particular layer, edit it in any way, then I need to select it first. What you'll notice whenever you select a mask or you create a mask is that the colors in the bottom of the color picker will default naturally to black and white, no matter what colors you may have selected. So the mask works like this. I can use any of the tools of Photoshop to paint on the mask using black. I can adjust the opacity and flow, which we'll get to in a moment, so I can regulate how that occurs, but I can use any tool to apply black or shades of black to my mask. Now when I do that, and this is probably best demonstrated, so I'm going to make sure I've got black as my foreground color. I'm going to pick up a soft edge brush, and I'll make the brush a decent size using those square bracket keys to the right of the letter P. If you look up at the top of the screen, we've got opacity and flow. I'm going to be working entirely through these videos with the opacity set to 100%, but with this little button pressed, I'm going to adjust the flow using the numbers on my keyboard. At the moment it's at the maximum, so we'll come back and make a change to this in a moment. So the way the mask works is like this. I can paint over the image, and as you can see with my soft brush, I can make a big hole in that top layer, and if I turn the bottom one off, you can see more clearly what I've done. But the benefit of working in layers and masks is that I can save both of these layers and the mask as a Photoshop file. I can come back to it an hour later or a week later and I can repair the mask, because we're never actually removing pixels, and if you look carefully at the pelican image to its left, you can see it's all still there. To repair the mask, I can either just flood my mask with white. I could do that with shortcut keys. Control backspace will flood my background color, and over on the left hand side you can see that is the color in the background of my color picker. But if I bring it to the front, now I'm spraying white and I can repair the mask. So that gives us a high degree of flexibility and also creativity when we're working with layers and layer masks. Now let me turn my bottom layer back on again. What I'm going to do though is I'm going to use a different tool on my layer mask, because if I make my foreground color black, for example, I'm going to pick up my gradient tool from the middle of the toolbox. From the options at the top of the screen, I'm going to use the default, which is linear mode. But from the options in here, I'm going to use foreground to transparent. Now we can see that by the little hint of the blue and white checkerboard effect that tells us that we're looking at a transparent layer. Once I've done that, I can click and draw a line. Where the line starts, the mask will be solid black. Where it ends, it'll be transparent, and it will be blended nicely in the middle. And because we're working on a mask, if we get things wrong, it does not matter at all. So I'm going to first just take a quick guess at this. I'm just going to click and drag, and you'll get an idea of what we've done. Now for a quick attempt, that wasn't bad at all. It's achieved more or less what I wanted to achieve. Now we can look at the mask in a couple of different ways. First of all, the important thing is if we hold the Shift key and click the mask, we can turn it off. And sometimes we need to do that while we're working. To turn it back on again, we just click the mask. We can actually see the mask in its entirety by holding the Alt key and clicking the mask. Now when the mask appears like this is probably a nice way to sort of explain how masks work. You can think of it almost as an invisible sheet sitting over the top of the pelican on the right. And as you can see, where I paint black, it becomes transparent, and where it's white, then it becomes solid. If I turn the layer off beneath, you can see exactly what we've done with the gradient, but we can also now start to see that I actually did go a little bit too far with it, and I drifted over the bird's beak. Now it's not uncommon for these sorts of things to happen, so I'm going to go back to my layers and turn my bottom layer on, because one of the beauties of the mask, which I demonstrated a few moments ago, is when we select the mask, of course we can switch to a different tool and we can start to paint white, and we can repair the beak of the pelican on the right. If I zoom in and we see it much larger, it's difficult to see that we're actually losing something here, but we know we are, and there's the evidence of it. We shouldn't be able to see any of the checkerboards through the beak. So select the mask, go back to my color picker at the bottom of the toolbox. I'm going to switch to white. I'm going to select a standard soft edge brush. I don't want it quite that big, but it can be fairly large. But now I'm going to change the flow rate of the tool I'm using. And because I've got this little button pressed, I can do this with the keyboard. So if I want to spray 10%, I can touch the 1 key. If I want to go to 20%, it's the 2 key, all the way up the numbers. When we get to the 9 key, we get 90. 0 takes us back to 100. But if I wanted a much more delicate flow, such as 5%, if I just hit 0, 5 in reasonable quick succession, then that's what I get selected. On this occasion, I think 10% will do fine. But don't worry, always start with a low flow, much easier to build up slowly and increase rather than overdo things. So I'll touch the 1 key and get my brush over the beak of the bird, ready to start. Now it's going to be just a little bit difficult for me to see where I need to go here. So it may help if I went back to my layers and just temporarily turned off the pelican on the left. Because as I then start to spray down the mask, and I'll adjust my brush size a little bit, you can see I'm gradually removing that checkerboard effect, and I must make sure I get it nice and solid down the bottom. We've got a bit of an overspray here, but because we're working with a soft brush and because of the nature of the work we're doing, it works pretty well. Now I wonder if it'll help if I just temporarily show you the mask by touching the Alt key and clicking it. So you can see that we've made our gradient, but then we've just adjusted it in one small place to make things work for us. Now supposing I wanted to move my pelican on the right closer to the one on the left. Well, I should be able to do that because this little chain link links the image and the mask. We can remove the link, and I've never found the need to do that in my photography, but I'm sure graphic artists may find a need for it. But here I can select the image now because I want to move the image. I can select the move tool from the top of the toolbox, and I can either click and drag, but I think on this occasion I'll hold the shift key and use my left arrow on the keyboard just to nudge one image closer to another. So if I wanted to slightly adjust my image to be closer together like that, it's quite quick and easy to do, and the mask will follow the bird. It probably would be a good idea to just turn the bottom layer off just to make sure moving it is going to have an effect on any of the images, and we can do it the other way around too. Now you can see as I do it this way around, you can see a little bit of the mask is now, or a little bit of this image is now appearing over this bird. So what we could do is adjust the mask once again. So I can select the mask. Now I want to select black as my foreground color. I'm going to pick up my brush. I'm going to go in nice and tight because all I want to do is just make sure that the bird here and the beak is nicely displayed. But of course I'd have to recrop this at some stage, but that's no great shakes. There we have it. Now I've just saved this as a Photoshop file, calling it copy and paste number 1. It's always a good thing to save a Photoshop file of work of this nature because we save both the layers and also the mask, and as I said a few moments ago, we can come back in an hour, next week or next year, and it'll be just where we left it. Now we will be using masks quite a bit and copy and paste too. Once we're sure we're finished with the mask, we can apply it, and we may want to do that from time to time. To do that, if we go and select the mask from the layers and right click, there it is, apply layer mask. Now when it's applied, what it does is exactly what we did with the mask. So if I turn off the bottom layer, although the mask is gone, all of the masking that we did is still in place, so it does make the image work. But of course, unless I hit Ctrl Z to bring that mask back, if I'd have saved those two layers on their own, when I come back sometime later, of course, I cannot redo the mask or make any corrections to the mask because I've applied it. Now one other way we can apply the layer mask is when we flatten both of these layers together. So assuming I've got my two layers and my mask saved, which I have as my copy and paste one, I can go to the top right of the layers here and I can flatten the image to finish. Whenever we copy and paste in Photoshop, it will always create what we're pasting onto a new layer, and that gives us the versatility to be able to edit what's on that layer independently of any other. But when we start to add layer masks, we really open up the power of Photoshop's layers.